Caught in a tangled web of deceit, Daisy pulled the classic move. "I thought you wouldn't help me if you knew," while hiding a romance with a guy during our courtship. Now, after discovering she was juggling me and another, I'm left questioning everything. Should I finally let her go? So this is a complicated situation, but I am going to try my best to create a cohesive narrative out of an absolute tumultuous mess. I am a 42-year-old male and have been in an on-again, off-again relationship, sometimes official and other times just heavily emotionally involved, with someone who is 46 years old, Daisy, for over a year. We were together 8 years ago, but we separated after 3 months. In December of 2023, we began communicating again. Despite being 3 hours apart, we also started discussing the possibility of getting back together. We had a tremendous rapport, and despite, or perhaps because of our ages, we quickly began to talk about marriage. Mostly this was initiated by her. We were unable to see each other until the following February, as our schedules clashed extensively and we could not take time off, but the conversations continued, filled with declarations of love and other expressions of affection. Essentially, there was a lot of love bombing on her part. We had an argument in February of 2024, and we did not communicate for a few weeks, but then we returned to normalcy. During that time, she mentioned an indefinite trip to New Mexico while I live on the East Coast to stay with a friend. She took the trip in early May 2024 but returned after a week, expressing that she felt she was making a huge mistake and wanted something stable with me. This language raised my eyebrow, but I chose not to dwell on it, as I had prior to her New Mexico journey when she attempted to triangulate me with another man by highlighting his positive traits in contrast to what she perceived as my negatives. While she was away, I also discovered her Reddit account, which included a January comment referring to dating someone from a subreddit who had visited from the West. When I confronted her about this, she briefly blocked me and claimed it was a fabricated story she created for karma to make a girl who stalks that male jealous, so she would pursue him, asserting they had only partied together as friends. This explanation felt dubious, but I decided to move past it. When she returned, our schedules aligned better, and we became officially together. Unfortunately, complications in her life made her living situation, at a minimum, uncomfortable. Rather than accept my invitation to stay with me, citing the tumultuous nature of our past, she chose to go back to New Mexico, and we did not communicate much, as I felt somewhat insulted. Fast forward to July 2024, and she expresses that she misses me and urges me to buy her a plane ticket, rescue her, and provide her a new life so that she could be with me, again alluding to making a huge mistake. This time she claims she was starting to feel sexually exploited as part of a throuple with the friends with whom she lived. As uncomfortable as that made me feel, I helped her escape the situation, and we began cohabitating. Since then, we have been in an on-again, off-again relationship. Recently, she revealed a partial truth. She was never sexually exploited or in a throuple, the female didn't even exist, but had actually started a relationship with the man she stayed with during that second trip, leaving and ghosting him once she realized she wanted to be with me more, not mentioning that she had a boyfriend because she thought I would not bail her out of the situation had I known, which is likely true. I did not take the revelation particularly well, although not as adversely as I might have. After all, we were separated and not communicating when she allegedly got involved with the man. However, as you may have guessed, this is not the end of the saga. Through sources other than Daisy, I discovered that the New Mexico man has been under the impression that they were together since December 2023 and that she only ended things with him when she left him last July. I confronted Daisy about this, and she revealed that they had hooked up in January after years of being platonic long-distance friends, as suggested in the Reddit post, and that they were involved during her first trip to New Mexico, during which she claimed to be single while still communicating as if we were going to get together. She stated that she had been involved with both of us simultaneously due to her living situation. She was, and had been staying with a friend in her unused unit because she could not get on her feet and wanted to keep her options open with both of us, both of whom she supposedly had genuine feelings for. I should mention that 8 years ago, she also had another man behind my back while we were dating and was far from being unhoused at that time. I feel that this pattern of behavior is incredibly shady. While I have sympathy for her due to her living circumstances, both she and the other man had been friends with her while she was dating other guys. So it is not as though either one of us would have vanished from the potential to be her partner in the future if she had chosen to date the other in full disclosure. Although I this time, not 8 years ago, was not genuinely being cheated on, I still feel profoundly disrespected that she would lead me to believe I was the only man in the world, even though I was not even the only man she was involved with. I should have the right to decide whether I want to entertain a person who is involved with someone else. The deceit also insulted my intelligence. I always sensed that something was amiss, and she always had some fabricated excuse to try to convince me otherwise. Furthermore, the existence of another man truly makes me question the sincerity of her emotions, even if she ultimately chose to be with me. Do you all think I should just cut her off? Story 2. Sneaking out at 4 a.m. to comfort my ex after I found out she sent nudes. You won't have to deal with me again. Panic sets in as I race on my mini bike through the dark woods, terrified of losing her. Was I a simp or just in love? What happens next? So essentially, I have been seeing that girl for 2 years now, and we were both 18 at the time of this story. It would be about 1 year and 9 months around summertime. I had just been on a little break with my ex for 1 week. I was relaxing at home, sitting on my bed and listening to some music, when suddenly my friend messaged me out of nowhere with a chat saying, "Yo, I just saw your girl's explicit pictures." I was shocked, of course, who wouldn't be? I confronted her about it on a FaceTime call because it was midnight, and I was at home in disbelief and quite upset. I asked her, "Is there something you want to tell me?" She just stared at me with a blank expression and did not respond. I looked at her and told her I knew what she had done. She looked back at me and said she was sorry. I asked her why she would do that because it was only a week ago that we had taken a break. She replied that she did not know and that it was a foolish mistake. I told her I did not appreciate what she had done because during that week, I was trying to better myself to ensure we would be ready for the next time we could potentially reconcile. I expressed my feelings, stating that finding out she did this, especially through my brother, he had to see her explicit pictures, not to mention the guy to whom she sent them, who then sent them to another guy and ultimately to my friend. I made it clear that I was not okay with it. Also, I mentioned how irresponsible it was to send such pictures to anyone. Who knows what they could do with it? I thought she was smart enough to understand that. I told her I really wanted to resolve our issues, but after discovering what she had done, I reconsidered. She begged and pleaded for me not to leave, however, she still acknowledged it was my decision. I allowed her to explain herself a bit more, during which she said something along the lines of, "I don't know, we weren't dating," and that she was quite upset about it, which made me feel bad. But I told her, "Listen, what you did was wrong. However, if you can assure me that you are truly sorry and that it was a foolish mistake, I believe we can come to some compromise and work things out." She apologized and claimed it was genuinely a mistake. There is another story that contradicts this statement, but I will share that another time. I said, "Okay, but I do not forgive you and my trust in you is nearly gone. However, I still think we can sort this out." I hope that is a reasonable statement. Keep in mind that this entire event is taking place around 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. on a Sunday morning. I reassured her that everything would be okay, and I knew we could fix this and move past it. I envisioned that most couples have to navigate their ups and downs to move forward, right? That was my reason for looking forward to this and not entirely giving up just yet. I was exhausted and ready for sleep when she told me good night and I responded in kind. Then she said to me, "You won't have to deal with me again." What? At this point I became concerned. I asked her what she meant and she said, "You just don't have to worry about me ever again." Now I thought she had crossed a serious line with that statement and I was quite worried that she was going to harm herself in some way. With that thought, I got up from my bed and sneaked out of the house. I am 17 years old, so I cannot drive yet, and at that point I did not have my permit yet, which meant I was not really familiar with how to use a car. As of now, while telling this story, I do have my permit. It was around 4:30 a.m. I quietly left the house through the garage and hopped on my mini bike. I drove down the driveway and onto the road, heading to her house. It was summer, so the weather was nice, but my mini bike did not have headlights, it was dark outside, and it was probably almost out of gas. Not to mention that I was likely breaking the law. I rode the roads, pushing my mini bike to its fastest speed. Since I live in a remote area and she lives in a town, I could not ride my mini bike into the town without the risk of getting caught. With that in mind, I got as close as I could to the town, parked my mini bike in the middle of the woods, and started running to her house. I ran and ran until I could finally see her house, reached her front door, and called her on FaceTime. I asked her, "Can you please come outside? We need to talk." She came outside, and while she did not do what I feared, she was still crying. I simply gave her a hug and told her everything was going to be all right. I reassured her and expressed my love, assuring her that we could get through this together. She was surprised by how I got to her house, and I told her it was worth it just to make sure she was okay. She told me she was sorry and promised it would not happen again, just wait until the next story. I accepted her word and headed back to the woods to my mini bike. I arrived at my mini bike exactly where I had left it, but when I tried to start it up again, it refused to start. I pulled on the lever repeatedly, but nothing worked. I had no choice but to haul the bike out of the woods and back to my home. So that is what I did. I started walking, feeling scared because I was in the middle of the woods. It was still quite dark, I was sweating, and I was really tired. I finally reached the start of the road and began walking back home with my bike. I switched the ignition again and pulled on the lever, and thankfully it started. I made it home in 10 minutes. By the time I got home, it was around 5:30 a.m. and my mom wakes up at 6:00 a.m. and had no idea I had left. I sneaked back in and tried to get as much sleep as possible because I had work at 9:00 a.m., but I was just glad I could see my girl, now ex, was okay for the time being. Am I an idiot? Yes. Am I a simp? Most definitely. However, I would go to great lengths if it meant I could be with her and support her. With that said, please rate my story. It is true, it did happen. I would appreciate your advice and thoughts on it. Story 3. After a heated breakup with my girlfriend 30, I found out she was dating a guy friend she'd gone hiking with. You were the only mature girl I've talked to, she joked, while I tried to be supportive. Now I'm left wondering if I was just a rebound. Did I get cheated on? So here is a bit of backstory. I, 28 years old, and my ex, 30 years old, met on a dating application, exchanged social media accounts, and discussed a variety of topics such as our hobbies, how our previous relationships ended, and some personal matters. Her backstory was quite difficult, involving her being cheated on multiple times. She had a much tougher experience than I did. We dated a few times, and about a month after getting to know her, I noticed that she was not entirely present. She asked me to stop pursuing her, but we continued with our planned date for the sake of it. I was given another chance a week later, and eventually we became a couple after 3 months of dating. A month after we started our relationship, she confessed to me that she had a relapse stemming from her previous relationship, where she had been cheated on. I tried to comfort her as much as possible, and she got through it fairly quickly. When I asked her if she had a relapse during the time when she told me to stop pursuing her, she admitted that she did. I noticed that after her first relapse, she became easily irritated over things like poor photography and affectionate nicknames. I apologized frequently, considering what she had endured previously. She would even ask me if she was being too harsh with me, and I would reassure her that it was acceptable given what she was experiencing as a woman: premenstrual syndrome, hormonal imbalances, menstrual periods, and that she had faced numerous challenges in her life, including work stress. This pattern persisted even when we were together. On one of the rare occasions she made a joke, she claimed that she was the only mature girl I had ever talked to. This did not sit well with me, as I felt she was implying that my previous girlfriend was immature. During a phone call, I expressed that my ex did not deserve such disparagement and suggested that sometimes she might need to lighten up a little. She apologized, but after our conversation, she stated that she would return everything I had spent on our dates and would cut me off from her contacts. I managed to convince her to reconsider, and we continued our relationship. This became one of the main issues we faced during our brief time together. Whenever I attempted to express my feelings, she would assume she was a terrible person, which made me feel guilty. I explained to her that feedback was meant to help us grow rather than to tear us down, as long as the criticism was valid. I also told her to be as honest with me as possible because it would be worse if she suppressed her feelings. Regarding the second relapse, I tried to dismiss it, but it still troubled me. I was not concerned about her getting upset with me on a weekly basis. Rather, I felt inadequate for her. The first relapse and the mood swings associated with it seemed to be her way of reacting, and she often directed that frustration toward me. For days, we exchanged affectionate messages and continued our usual phone calls. However, I began to notice she started making jokes about how she was only interested in casual dating, not dating with a view to marriage. I asked her if she was truly committed to me, and she replied no. When I inquired about when I could visit her again, she said that she had informed her grandmother that we had broken up. She laughed and claimed she was joking, but it made me uncomfortable. She also criticized my choice of clothing, pointed out habits that bothered her, made remarks about my weight, and asked if I could gain weight to reach 70 kilograms. I was at 65 and recovering from gastritis at that time. I made sure to eliminate those bad habits, such as chewing loudly while eating, increased my weight to 70 kilograms, improved my photography skills, and so on to avoid embarrassing her and to meet her expectations for an ideal partner. Additionally, she questioned my sexual orientation due to my clumsiness. I was not genuinely offended by any of this. It did make me self-conscious about my weight, but that was all. During our last month together, I received the silent treatment for no apparent reason, and we got into a verbal altercation that resulted in a breakup on bad terms. The silent treatment always felt like it made those who actually cared appear foolish. It was an intense argument, and that was the last time we spoke. For days afterward, I wondered if I had been inconsiderate or if I should have apologized, thinking things might have turned out differently. More than a month after our breakup, I came across pictures of her with a male friend from a hike that she is now dating. Then it dawned on me. During our final month together, she had told me she did not feel like talking and wished to relieve the sense of missing me. We had reconciled just days before our breakup, returning to our usual affectionate messages. I never felt jealous of the friends she made during her hikes. In fact, I was grateful to them for supporting her in completing the climbs. She had ambitions, and I had always supported her. I have moved on from her, but one thing that troubles me is whether she cheated during our relationship, as I never expected betrayal to come from someone who had first-hand experience with infidelity. It also led me to question myself. I have been losing sleep for several days now, reflecting on what occurred and how much I compromised to ensure she did not endure the same hardships she faced previously. However, it also made me realize that perhaps I should have respected myself much more than I did. In summary, it appears my ex was unfaithful to me with the man she met during one of her hikes. Edit: I have summarized the backstory. Edit 2: I corrected our ages. Story 4. My boyfriend of 26 cheated while I was helping his friend through a divorce, claiming, "I can't remember," yet wanted to be held accountable. After countless heartbreaks and emotional outbursts, I realized I was losing myself in his chaos. Did I love him too much? He had known her for years before I did, and I was aware of their interactions. Additionally, I had spent time with her a couple of times as well. She was dealing with a divorce due to domestic violence, so I wanted him to be a good friend to someone who had supported him when he was struggling with substance abuse. I did raise concerns to him when she began messaging him late at night and making inappropriate jokes, almost as if she was testing the waters. However, he never engaged with those comments and even found them strange, insisting that she was not like that. I thought I was being unreasonable and insecure. He confessed to the incident a day later, stating that he couldn't really remember what happened but that she did, based on text messages he allowed me to read. He claims he was taken advantage of, yet he never insisted that his behavior was not a cause for concern because of his struggles with alcoholism. I am still unsure how to categorize what occurred, but he asked me to call it cheating because he wanted to be accountable. I eventually broke up with him, but I struggled to stay away. During that time, he ended up kissing one of his coworkers and confessed to it. As a result, we went no contact, but due to my foolishness, I reached out again. We decided to try to work things out. We weren't officially back together, but I expressed a preference for him to stay away from other people. However, while intoxicated on alcohol and psychedelic mushrooms, he kissed another coworker in his car. I was once again devastated. Regardless, he promised that he would start treating me with love and with everything I deserved. I believed him, so I stayed. About a month later, while grappling with trust issues, I looked through his messages and discovered that he had visited another coworker's house while we were no contact. I did not confront him until I had an emotional outburst, at which point he admitted the truth. I understand it was not cheating since we were not together, but he had concealed that information from me despite my request for honesty about any actions he took while we were apart because I had been open with him. Nevertheless, I stayed. A month later, he decided to pursue sobriety, which was a result of significant failures in another area of his life. I felt relieved. He began attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, got a sponsor, completed the steps, and has been sober for a year. I am extremely proud of him. Unfortunately, I had not realized I was neglecting my own well-being while dealing with the residual effects of betrayal. Instead, I invested my time in reading about alcoholism and attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings in an effort to understand him better. Although I do not regret it, I should have also focused on re-establishing my own sense of self. I began to feel jealous because he was progressing while I was still struggling with low self-esteem and emotional pain. Consequently, I would have episodes of verbal abuse, repeatedly bringing up past grievances. I could sense my empathy draining from me, and all I could see was anger. It felt like an out-of-body experience. I recognized that my actions were wrong but felt unable to control myself and would immediately feel guilty afterward. I felt shame. Therefore, I began therapy, and he did as well. It was incredibly beneficial, although it took a few months to grasp the process. I still experienced outbursts, but less frequently. I learned to utilize I statements when discussing my triggers. I am still learning how to actively listen, but my therapist provided me with materials that could assist us, which he dismissed as foolish. I wanted the cycle of negativity to end, but to him it seemed too late. Every time I attempted to communicate something or wanted him to be more open about discussing boundaries, he would either stonewall me or have the conversation while zoning out, offering little to say in return or mentioning that he understood he also needed to work on things, or even at times claim that he owed me nothing. It was becoming increasingly frustrating and lonely. He stopped wanting to plan dates and showed no interest in spending time together. Whenever I tried to talk to him, he would say he was tired. He began labeling me as overly emotional and sensitive. He referred to me as a burden. While that pales compared to what I have called him, it still stings. I recognize where he is coming from because I created an environment filled with anger and resentment after many changes on his part. Ultimately, I was the one who chose to stay. It is my responsibility to move forward as well. I have been striving to improve by trying to speak calmly instead of reacting impulsively. However, our breaking point occurred a few weeks ago when I began discussing a personal struggle, and he complained about my tendency to talk about my feelings. This caused me to become angry and react negatively. It was no longer sufficient. My outbursts had become his justification, much like how I used the betrayal as an excuse. He was emotionally depriving me, and I was emotionally draining him, resulting in a toxic cycle that felt endless. I still love him, but he now harbors resentment towards me for the person I became in the aftermath. I do not regret my love for him, but I regret not loving myself more.